the art of being human. Last week we worked with adolescents, and I got deeply involved in the things and the changes that occur in their lives, but today I want to do just a short review, although it may take the whole segment. I want to do a review of adolescence, just talking about the primary points that I was trying to make last week. Because adolescence is a special time in the person's life, and there are lots and lots of changes in the person and a lot of hormonal things going on, and they have a lot of mood changes and there are upheavals. So I'm just going to do a basic review of what I did last week, just to get kind of things tightened up a bit so you'll have a better understanding of your teenager if you have a teenager, or a better understanding of adolescence. So adolescence is from about ages 12 to 20. Now you might think that 20 is pretty much adult. A person can vote at 18, and they are much, much more adult than when they were younger, but the brain doesn't completely develop until age 25. So 18-year-olds are still considered to be children, and they're not fully adult until the brain fully develops at about mid-20s. So this is something that research has shown us over the years, and so therefore we have to keep that in mind. Now, it is preparation for adulthood, but it is not adulthood. You have to remember that your teenager that you think is pretty much mature is not fully mature, so we have to say that it's like a preparation for adulthood, but it is not truly adulthood, not until the brain completely develops. It is a time of storm and stress. In other words, the upheavals, the arguments, the problems that kids have, the bullying, and all of this. It is a time of upheaval, and so it's storm and stress. Now, these are the reasons for the upheavals and the problems which children have in their teenage years. Now, I know it may sound odd, I say children in their teenage years, but teenagers are considered to be children still. A 14, 15, 16-year-old is not considered to be an adult. So the reasons for the upheavals are these. For one thing, the hormones are very active. Girls have an influx of estrogen and progesterone, and their bodies change so they're able to have a baby. They're able to carry a child. This can happen pretty young in the teenage years. It also changes growth, it changes personality, it changes moods. There's all kinds of things that hormones do. And so when you're thinking about the way that a child develops, suddenly they shoot up. They start shooting up and getting taller in the pre-adolescent years. There is something called the prepubescent growth spurt. So about ages 10, 11, 12, when they're not quite teenagers yet, but they're close, all of a sudden they grow up, and they grow up fast. And so it's like they gain, well, my brother gained 6 inches in a year, and that's a lot of growth. And he was hungry all the time. He'd eat a meal, and then a few minutes later, I'm hungry, Mom. What can I have to eat? And so we took him to, my mother took him to a doctor. He's eating all the time, and he's tired all the time, and he's restless all the time, and he doesn't have any energy. What's going on? Well, they checked his growth, and he'd shot up 6 inches. All of the growth that he was going through was using all of the energy that his body had. And because his body had a certain amount of energy, but he was growing so fast that the growth was taking all of his energy, and that's what was going on. And it also explained why he was hungry all the time. The body was searching for energy sources as the growth continued. Now, of course, you can't slow that down. It is what it is, and you will find your children getting very large and very tall and heavier, and they'll be doing it fairly quickly because that's the way the body grows. So hormones play a very active part in a teenager's life and prepares them for adulthood, but they do have fluctuations in the way they feel and the way they act and the way they think, partly due to the hormonal nature of their growth. Now, the next thing is that upheaval is called by the fact that the brain is being rewired. And while it's being rewired, It will rewire by sections. You might have the thinking in one part. You may have movement on another. You'll find that the brain is being rewired, and while it is being rewired, and that starts around the time of teenage years, preteen, 11, 12, and it continues through mid-20s. So the part of the brain that's being rewired is a part of the brain that is not doing well in terms of functioning. Look at it this way. If you have something that's working okay, and the teenager's brain has been working all right all along, and suddenly you take it apart to change it, to put new things in it, to add new things to it. If it was some kind of a phone, you might add some apps or something, and suddenly it's not working like it did before. It's like it's starting all new. And so you take something apart, and you take something apart to work with it. It's not at all functioning the way that it used to function because it's not there. It's just changing and it's growing and so forth. So you've got to remember that as your teen is rewiring the brain, they cannot think or reason like they usually can because of the fact that the brain is just not functioning at full capacity, and you really don't expect it to function at full capacity when that is going on. But I think most parents don't realize what's going on. I had one mother say, my son was always so stable, but what's he doing now? I mean, I don't understand it. I hardly recognize it. He just is a different kid. And I said, well, how old is he? And she told me, and it was during that growth period, and I explained to her this rewiring process that goes on. And then she could understand it. So you have to understand that the brain is rewiring. Another reason for the upheavals is the fact that there's enormous stress on teenagers. They have choices that they have to make that we never had to make when we were kids. They have moral choices that they have to make that wasn't presented to us when we were younger. The internet has presented a whole new world to them that we were not privy to when we were young. Now, I'm not saying it's bad or it's good. I'm just saying it's different. We can't change society to be what it was, although I think it was healthier in past years. There weren't as many choices, but people knew their roles and they grew into them, and there was not so much horrible stuff going on. But now with the internet, and I'm not blaming the internet, I'm not saying that the internet is bad per se. I'm fascinated by it. I use it too. But you see, there's just so much. And the teenager needs more structure. And the more you give them, the more confused that they can be because life is stressful. And what they get on the internet isn't always healthy. And what they can find out on the internet is not necessarily healthy. And it's a source of bullying and other things. I know if I had a child that was being bullied, we would shut down the internet. They wouldn't be able to reach us. And so that would be one way of handling it. But there are all kinds of ways of handling it. And I may take some class time when I get through this teenage period and just talk about bullying and how to handle it and what it does to kids, because it does terrible things to kids. If you're in a family and you grew up and there was a lot of arguing, that changed you. And that was something that you had to deal with. So it's not just bullying from people who are in their classes, but it's what they get from their parents if their parents aren't stable. If you have a family that's not stable, the children's not going to be stable. They have nothing to lean on to support them. So that's what you have to remember. So the stress on teenagers is a problem. Also, they're very concerned about being like everybody else. They want to be as tall as everybody else. They want to dress like everybody else. They want to be like everybody else so they'll be accepted. They're very concerned about being accepted in a group, a popular group. So therefore they get their identity from their friends who support them because they're in the group and they're accepted by that group. So that's an issue that they have to deal with, and adults, we all went through it. They want to be popular, they want to be liked, they want to make a name for themselves, and that's all healthy and normal if it's done in a healthy and normal way. But if that doesn't happen, and they get bullied, then it kind of boils up within them. The anger boils up within them. When they're angry and they can't do anything about it, then they get depressed. And then they decide they have to express it, and they do something like a school shooting or something like that. If you talk to people, if you talk to students that have been perpetrators of crimes or perpetrators of school shootings, you will find that most of them were quiet. But why were they quiet? There were a lot of them being bullied, and it was just building up like a pressure cooker until finally they couldn't stand it anymore, and they didn't feel like they could do anything about it. No matter what they did, the bullying got worse and worse. Well, I would not allow a child to go to school and undergo that. That is not normal. They shouldn't have to deal with that. If I had a child, I would pull him out of school. I'd teach him at home. I would also be talking to the school board, and something would be done. If something wasn't done, then I would do something myself. Basically, I'd take the child out. There's no reason why a child should be destroyed because other people pick on him. And that should never be allowed to happen. There is no excuse for it. But we do find that most of the bullies were bullied themselves. They grew up that way. Their parents bullied them. Other people bullied them. And to them, it's normal behavior. But they're getting all of their anxiety out by doing to somebody else what was done to them. We have to teach children there's a better way to behave, and that they can get help for what's happened to them, and they can get the services that they need, and they don't have to perpetuate it. They don't have to do it to somebody else the way that people have done them. You just have to think about that. So there is a lot of stress, and all of the academics they have to go through, and all of the things they have to do with computers in classes. It's just not the same kind of teaching environment as it used to be when we were young. When I say we were young, I'm 80 years old, so it was a long time since I was in grade school. But the human body doesn't change, and human emotions don't change, and the reaction to stresses don't change either. So a lot of people are trying to work. A lot of students are trying to work and go to school at the same time. They're saving for college, or they're in college. And remember, if you start college, usually you start college at about 18 years old, you're technically still a child. If you graduate, let's say if you start school at 6 years old, by the time you get to 16 or 17, you're about ready to graduate from high school, but you're not completely mature yet. It doesn't happen until age 25. And then when you go to college, you may have to work and go to school at the same time, and that's a stress by itself. I know my parents did not want me working when I was in college because I was very active. I was very busy. I took a full course load. I was in every band and every orchestra, and I started college when I was 14 years old. That's a little young, but I had been given permission by the university to be a special student. And I wasn't old enough to drive, so my parents had to drive me to my classes, but they didn't mind doing that. They considered it to be kind of an honor that I would be chosen to go to college at 14. And so I did. I was a special music student, and it worked out quite well for me. But I wasn't bullied and I wasn't harassed. I had all kinds of family support. Some students don't have that. They're not that fortunate, and that's where a problem comes in. Now, the three things that need to be resolved in teenage period are these, and these can change as we go along. But one thing that kids have to do is to work with their belief system. What are they going to believe with as they grow up? Are they going to continue in church? Are they going to change churches? What is going to be their philosophy of life? And that's very important because teenagers think a lot about what are they going to be? What are they going to believe in? What are they going to fight for? What are they going to be willing to stand up for? And that occupies a lot of their thoughts because they really want to find out who they are. They want to find out how they fit in society. And so they think about that quite a bit. And we have to be helping them with it. Then the other second thing that has to be resolved is their education. Are they going to go to college? If so, where? Do they want a 2-year school? Do they want a 4-year school? Do they want to have a career in which it's going to be necessary for them to go on and get a master's degree? I have 3 college degrees and then went into the ministry. So I spent a long time in school. And some people, they just want to go to high school and get a job and settle down. Generally speaking, you don't really settle down until you finished your education, whatever that is, so that the teenage years and the storm and stresses of teenage years last at least until you finish your education. Now, a lot of people work and then go back to college. It's a little different situation. They've already matured. But this is something to think about. What kind of education do you want? College, junior college, a special program where you get a special skill? Or if you want to go and be a doctor, you could spend 10 years in school. You could spend 4 years in pre-med. You could spend 4 years in medical school. That's after 4 years of pre-med. And then 2 or 3 years just learning a specialty, plus your internships. You know, you can spend a good 10 years or so in school becoming a physician. And then if you want to go further, you want to go into psychiatry, you want to become a heart specialist, you want to become a surgeon, a brain surgeon or something. I had a niece, she's very brilliant. She told me, it's brain surgery or nothing. And I said, well, you know, there's lots of time and there's lots of things between brain surgeon and nothing. And she turned out she is in the medical field doing very, very well. She's not a doctor, but she practically is a doctor. So anyway, you could spend a lot of time in school. That is going to increase your adolescence because you can't really settle down until you're done through school. For the most part. Now, there are always exceptions to the rule of what I'm talking to you about, but I'm giving you the main thing here. So, the longer the educational experience, the longer the teenage years. There is no set time when a child becomes an adult. They kind of float into it. They kind of fall into it. When is a child an adult? It's an issue that I decided to talk about a little last week. When does a child become an adult? Well, in our society, there is no place and there's no time when you get to a certain point and you are adult. Now, the Jewish people in the Jewish faith the boys go through a bar mitzvah, and they can be considered adult when that's completed. There's also something that's similar to that for girls to go through if they wish to do it in the same faith, the Jewish faith. But in other countries, in times past, there were certain things that they had to do, and when they did those things, they were considered to be adult. And then I think I'll close it here, and I'm going to go into that a little in the next session, so we'll complete this up next session. But I want you to think about the things I've said, because the storms and stresses are real for the teenager. They really do have problems with that. And yet in society in the past, there wasn't that much of a problem, but the society was simple. They knew the rules. They went along with the rules, and it just wasn't that kind of a problem. So we'll close it here, and please join me next time.